slow, lazy, browsing sort of fish, the bream is. It hasn't the excitement of some other fishes, but it has its own special sort of charm, as much a charm of atmosphere as anything else. The waters in which you find the bream are usually of the slow or still sort, with muddy bottom and much growth of rushes at the margin. Just to look at the bream, you can see that it's not a very active and dashing sort of fish. It's very deep in the body, very narrow from side to side, with a bronzy tarnish over the silver. In fact, it's rather like an old pewter dish standing on edge. It feeds almost entirely on the bottom, and because it has this very deep shape with a small head, it tilts, and nearly stands on its head to feed. When it feeds, grubbing in the bottom, it sends clouds of little bubbles up to break at the surface. The bream is essentially a show fish, and bream shows may sometimes be enormous. Because the bream is such a heavy feeder, the shows move about a lot, browsing as they go, as they must if they're to continue feeding. Tackle for bream varies a lot from place to place, but there's no better rod than one of 11 feet, with plenty of action. As good a method as any is float fishing, and because the fishing is done in such placid water, you don't need too large a float, except in some circumstances when this may be otherwise. But one that carries 3 BB shot is usually good in the majority of cases. The size of hook depends upon the bait. Baits are paste, maggot, worm, bread crust, bread flake, or it may be a number of other things. Now, where shall we go to fish for bream? Well, the northern part of Somerset has a great many waters holding bream. There are the rivers Brew and Parrot, and a number of man-made waters such as the Huntsville River and the King's Sedgemoor Drain. We're going to the North Drain. Lying in this flat, fenny, willowy part of Somerset, it's a peaceful, sluggish, placid sort of water where time seems to stop. But it breeds a great many fine fish, and among them are vast numbers of bream. There are 2 main ways you can set about finding bream. One is to search the water until you find a discoloration caused by the feeding of those hordes of slow, greedy bream grubbing in the bottom. The other way is by ground baiting, and for the best chance of success you will need to do it each day for several days in advance, thus inducing the bream to congregate where they find a steady supply of food. This angler is Brian Young, and he has ground baited this swim for several days. With any sort of luck, he should find the bream here in the nice bream hole with a soft, oozy bottom. Brian Young has been using and is continuing to use a ground bait of stale bread, soaked and then mashed up, mixed with sausage rusk. When it hits the water, it's firm enough to reach the bottom before it breaks up, and spreads to encourage the shoals of bream into thinking that this is a good feeding place. He knows that the depth of water here is about 5 feet, so he adjusts his float about 1.5 feet more than the depth of the water. That'll take the bait along the bottom, so that the bream will find it lying there, looking entirely natural and innocent. His rod, by the way, is a fiberglass one, 12 feet long. Brian is going to use maggots first, on a number 14 hook. Nice lively maggots to catch the fish's eye in their still water. More ground bait before he casts. See, the maggot bait on the end of the nylon lies nicely along the bottom, away from the shot. And the float tilts nicely, a bit towards half-cock. Now he settles down to wait. It's a slow, unhurried sort of fishing, at least to start with. The bream might, of course, start biting right away. But often you must wait for them to come on to the feed. ground baiting all the time, trying to encourage them. And when they do come on feed, to this particular swim. As you know, most fishing needs patience, and fishing for bream has its own particular kind of patience. Brian's not worried that he's not yet had a bite. He knows that the fish are there. He must wait for them to start feeding, and have confidence that eventually his ground baiting and his tactics will strike a fish, and he will know that the shoal is there, and he'll carry on fishing for them. Meanwhile, he waits, ground baiting steadily, always on the alert for those bubbles on the surface that show that they're feeding.